Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Truth Seekers. Coach Nick, super pumped to engage in today's Coach's Corner. We got some mailbag questions. We'll get into it. Appreciate everybody submitting their questions, whether that's via YouTube or LinkedIn or Dropbox or just emailing us the questions. We have a couple email questions we're going to dive into today. Let's do it. Coach, I'm going to start off with a question right off the bat here. This is from Roger in Charlotte, actually. He wants to know, how do you celebrate your victories?
That's a great question. I think there can be a big spectrum of what celebration means to certain people. I definitely had a lot of resistance to celebration when I first understood the concept of why it's important. Because to me, celebration was like jumping up and down. Like I didn't really want to celebrate at birthdays or like special occasions because I just didn't want to go out too far out there. But I think celebration is just an acknowledgement of something that you've done and there's an outcome that's happened that's been favorable to you based on the action that you took. I think that's how I see it. And so therefore the celebration comes in lots of different ways. Just being intentional about like just taking a second sometimes, just go sit back, go, yeah, like that was awesome. That was a cool thing that happened today because I did that. Or that just for yourself. Another cool way I like to celebrate is just share it with people that are closest to you, because when you share things they tend to magnify and amplify, take on more. So for me, like they're my real go-to. Like it's important that of just the acknowledgement to show what's going great. That's how I tend to think about it.
Yeah, I think of it like this. So similar to that, but a celebration implies to me, like celebration is a time when I feel really good, right? Whether that's about something I've accomplished or about myself or about even somebody else. So if I'm intentional about how I'm celebrating, it's just about me feeling good. So how do I get myself to feel good? And it could be as simple as, like you said, creating the space to just think about it, just revel in what you've accomplished and reflect on the day. Nightly gratitudes could be an example of a celebration. I am grateful for this. And it kind of makes you seek out what you're grateful for, what the celebration is, during that day. I when I first read this question, for whatever reason, my mind immediately jumped to like, drinking. And we've talked about this before, I think maybe even on an earlier episode, but we have pretty similar opinions on alcohol. And I think it's so, for whatever reason, tied to the fabric of society that alcohol and drinking is part of celebration. But it's funny, if you and I do a fast or we go a month without drinking, like, how do we celebrate that? It's funny, sometimes we come back to having a drink to celebrate non-drinking. But it all comes down to feeling good. And I think that's maybe another conversation about changing our normal. But the celebration for me is feeling good. So whatever way you can get that, whether that's, like you said, sharing it with a friend, having your own space to reflect on it and revel in it, but also some sort of reward at the end that maybe is not a vice or counterintuitive to whatever you've accomplished or are celebrating.
Can I extend this then? Because this popped up in my mind about like, why do we do anything? And like oftentimes I think about that in terms of pleasure and pain, right? To avoid pain, move towards pleasure. I start to think about it as keeping the pleasure, but instead of pain, it's like it's pleasure or it's growth. And I thought that's an interesting frame. It's like, am I going to do something? Either it's going to bring, why would I go take a trip? Why would I go and do anything? It's either going to be for one of those two reasons, right? It's going to be pleasure or it's going to be growth. Because pleasure is not sustainable. If it's just pleasure, you'll run out of things to find that are pleasurable. If like you drank every day, then drinking doesn't become a pleasure, it becomes a necessity. And so there's no pleasure there anymore. It's like if you were a 10 out of 10 energy all the time, then by default, that 10 out of 10 starts to become lower, because how can you be a 10 out of 10 all the time? There's got to be some oscillation there. You can't be a 10 out of 10 like in the shower at the end of the day, the same as you would be if you were in front of a client jumping around. It's not, I mean, you can change what a 10 out of 10 means, of course, but the energy that you need is different. And so if you don't oscillate, you don't appreciate the ends of it. So if you're going to go do something, just like, is it something that you're going to grow from? Therefore, is it going to be work? Like, is it going to be something that pushes yourself and to expand yourself, so that when you go do something that's pleasurable for just pleasure itself, then it becomes even more powerful because you're a different person in that moment.
Mm.
Actually, I was talking to a client about this with things they're doing with our children, right? And he's a teenage son, and they do things together, but it's either do things together for that out and out pleasure, or it's things together for a growth experience together. Have just enjoy the time with each other, pleasure, but also to be in a place where you can learn and grow and have an experience as well.
Mm.
I think that's pretty much. I couldn't think of a third option. There's pleasure or growth when we spend with two people like we're closest with.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually really enjoy that frame. Maybe Eastern philosophers would call that the yin and the yang, right? It's two different energies, maybe opposing energies. It's difficult to have them at the same time. So in the father-son example, I think of like a learning experience or a teaching experience is usually when maybe the kid has hit a golf ball through the window or something like that. It's uncomfortable for somebody, but there's the growth experience. But they're together. They're not exactly maybe enjoying the time if they're screaming at each other, but that's the experience right there. But yeah, I think it's difficult to have both at the same time, to where it's growth and pleasure. I think if you can figure that out, you've hacked into something. But I think one energy kind of trumps the other one for a little bit, and it's just like this repetitive thing that they need each other to both expand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's huge, because then you don't have to reject either one when you experience it. Like the growth can come at uncomfortable times, but like we've mentioned in the past, embrace that. That's part of the process to expanding both of those energies. And then usually if you're growing, there's some sort of pleasure right on the other side.
Right. It's a. I mean, all of these things are like, there's a dichotomy to all of these things, right? It's like anything that's worth doing is often challenging. And I say this to clients often. It's like, well, like they might reflect that it's hard. We might decide that it's a challenge and it's not hard. But you know what? Like, I'm glad that it's hard and not easy if we're going to go with that route, because if it was easy, like, why are we even talking about it? So I'm going to do something until it's easy. If I keep doing it, it will become easy. And then the reality is, once it does become easy, it loses its value anyway.
Mm.
It's like the growth comes from things that are challenging, that appear to be not what you want to do. But the easy route is the route without value.
That's so huge. That's so huge. These are the simple secrets of the successful.
There you go.
Just hacking into making even your bad your good. Coach, awesome stuff. Great conversation. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you on next week's Truth Seekers.
Boom.